Chosen ones, you did the work. You changed. And somewhere along the way, you expected that the people who loved you would see that and feel relieved, maybe even proud. Instead, something shifted in the room. Not loudly, not with a confrontation you could point to, just a coolness that settled in, a distance you could not explain, a feeling that your healing was somehow inconvenient. That is a very specific kind of pain. It is not anger exactly. It is not grief exactly. It is closer to the feeling of being penalized for something you thought was worth celebrating. Like you finally did the hard thing and the people who were supposed to cheer went quiet instead. If you have ever felt that, this video is for you. What we are going to do today is not assign blame. It is not about making anyone a villain, and it is not about deciding who was right. It is about understanding something that most people, and especially most chosen ones, never get a clear answer to. Why does your growth bother people who knew the old you? What is actually happening beneath the surface? When someone who claimed to love you becomes uncomfortable with the fact that you are better, more grounded, more aligned, more whole. Because here is what most people miss. The discomfort your growth creates in others is almost never really about you. It is about something they have been quietly protecting inside themselves. Something your transformation is making harder to ignore. And for chosen ones, that often becomes even more obvious the moment you stop shrinking in ways that once made other people comfortable. And once you understand that, everything starts to make a different kind of sense. If any part of that landed for you, this channel was made for you. Like this video, subscribe, and stay close. This is a space built for chosen ones who are doing the quiet, costly work of growing. And right now, let us get into exactly what happens when the people around you start to feel that change before you have even said a word about it. Number 1, the shift they could feel before you even said a word. Growth does not usually announce itself. It does not send a warning. It does not come with a conversation or a declaration. It just begins to show up quietly in the small things. In how you respond when someone pushes at you, in what you are no longer willing to accept without comment, in the way you pause before reacting where you used to just react. You may not have even named it yet, but the people around you already felt it. That is the part most people do not expect. Your internal shift becomes readable to others before you have processed it yourself. A calmer tone in a situation that used to derail you. A boundary you hold where before you would have bent. A moment where you just let something go instead of chasing it. These are not dramatic changes. But to someone who had a very specific picture of who you were, they register like a fault line moving beneath the surface. And chosen ones often notice this before they can fully explain it. The room starts reacting to their new energy before they have even found language for what is changing inside them. Something feels different in the atmosphere long before anything is said out loud. And here is the part that is worth paying attention to. Your stillness bothers some people more than your breakdowns ever did. Your peace creates more friction than your pain used to. That says something, and it is not something about you, because your pain was easier for them to understand than your peace. Your confusion made you reachable. Your healing made you harder to control. What it says is that the shift is not threatening because something negative is happening. It is threatening because something internal has changed. And internal change implies that the unspoken contract of the relationship may no longer hold the same way it once did. Rules that were never spoken out loud are quietly being rewritten, and not everyone is ready for that. It is worth saying, though, that not everyone who feels unsettled by your growth is trying to hold you back. Some people simply do not know how to connect with a version of you that no longer needs what you once needed. Confusion and threat are not always the same thing. But even then, chosen ones often discover that the moment they stop betraying themselves to keep the peace, other people feel the difference before they can explain why they feel it. But discomfort is one thing. What happens when that discomfort becomes something more deliberate, more pointed, and much harder to explain away? Number 2. Why they preferred the version of you that was easier to manage. So that discomfort they are feeling is real. But now the question worth asking is, why? What is it about your growth specifically that creates that kind of reaction in someone who is supposed to care about you? Here is the part that most people never fully examine. Some relationships are not built on mutual respect or genuine connection. They are built on an arrangement, an unspoken one that nobody designed on purpose, but one that both people quietly settled into over time. There is the one who gives advice, and the one who always needs it, the one who holds it together, and the one who is always falling apart, the one who has the answers, and the one who always comes asking. These roles feel like closeness, they feel like love, but underneath them, there is often a quiet imbalance that only becomes visible when one person stops playing their part. When you heal, when you build confidence, when you stop needing to be rescued or reassured or guided through every hard thing, the structure of that arrangement starts to lose its flaw. And suddenly the person on the other side of it has a problem they cannot name out loud. Because here is what was actually happening beneath the surface. Your limitation was part of how someone else felt needed. Your struggle was part of how someone else felt capable. This is not about them being deliberately cruel. It is about how people unconsciously build their sense of identity through comparison and through the relational roles they occupy. Psychology describes this through social comparison theory and role identity. The idea that people anchor their self-worth to how they relate to others. When you change your role, their self-image gets destabilized. Because what your growth disrupted was not just a relationship dynamic, it was a role that helped someone feel strong, wise, needed, superior, or secure. And when chosen ones begin to heal, they often stop performing the version of themselves that made everyone else comfortable. Someone did not want a better you. They wanted a manageable you. They were fine with your potential, as long as it stayed unrealized. They were comfortable with your light, as long as it stayed dim enough not to change the balance between you. That is why the version of you that is finally becoming more honest, more grounded, more spiritually awake can feel so unsettling to people who were quietly attached to who you used to be. And once you understand that, something else about this whole experience starts to make a very specific kind of sense. Number 3, the quiet ways they try to pull you back. Now that you understand why some people needed you smaller, the next thing to recognize is what it actually looks like when they try to put you back there, because it almost never looks like what you would expect. It rarely comes as a direct confrontation. It rarely comes as someone sitting you down and saying they feel threatened by who you are becoming. It is much quieter than that. And because it is quiet, it is easy to second-guess whether you are even reading it correctly. It comes as a joke. "You have changed so much," said with a laugh that has something underneath it. It comes as a comparison. "You used to be so much more relaxed, more fun, more easy to be around." It comes wrapped in concern. "I just do not want you to get hurt. Are you sure about this? I say this because I know you." And then there is the one that cuts the deepest. The sudden remembering of old mistakes, old failures, old versions of choices you made years ago in a completely different chapter of your life, brought back up as if they are still the most accurate description of who you are. As if growth should come with an asterisk, and the past gets to veto the present. Here is what is actually happening in those moments. This is a form of social anchoring. The people who built their sense of ease and identity around a particular version of you have an unconscious interest in keeping that version alive. They are not plotting against you. They are trying to stabilize something in themselves by pulling the familiar back into the frame. Not everyone is disturbed by your success. Some people are disturbed by the fact that they can no longer define you through your old wounds. Nostalgia for the old you is sometimes just discomfort with the current you, dressed in softer language. And when someone says they miss who you were, what they often mean is they miss how accessible you were. They are not missing you, they are missing their access to you. They miss the version of you that explained yourself more, tolerated more, accepted less, and stayed small enough to keep their position intact. And for many chosen ones, that is the painful realization. The issue was not that you became less lovable. The issue was that you became harder to keep in a role that benefited somebody else. Which raises the harder question. What do you do when the person doing this is not a distant acquaintance, but someone you genuinely love? If this is landing somewhere real for you, take a second and hit the like button. It helps this reach another chosen one who has been feeling this shift but could not explain it. Some battles are silent, some losses are invisible, and some growth is lonely before it becomes powerful. You are not alone in this, and this community exists to remind you of that. Now, let us go deeper, because what this costs you on the inside is something we have not fully named yet. Number 4. The cost of growing while being watched by people who want you to stop. Growing in private is one thing. Growing while being watched by people who are quietly hoping you will return to who you were is something else entirely. When the people closest to you are observing your changes with skepticism or with a kind of guarded silence that you can feel even when nothing is said, every step forward carries an invisible weight. You are not just doing the work of becoming. You are doing it under a gaze that does not fully believe in what you are becoming. And that is when the loop starts. You begin questioning your own progress in ways you would not if the environment around you felt safe. Is this actually growth? Or am I just becoming someone different for the wrong reasons? Am I being selfish? Am I abandoning the people who need me? Am I moving forward? Or am I just running? If you have sat with those questions, this is worth hearing. That self-doubt is not a sign that you are getting it wrong. It is actually a sign of emotional intelligence, the ability to hold your own transformation and its impact on others at the same time. Most people who are genuinely growing do not barrel forward without a second thought. They feel the weight of it. They carry the questions. That is not weakness. That is awareness. And for chosen ones, this part can feel especially confusing, because the growth itself often feels deeply right, while the reactions around it feel deeply unsettling. Sometimes, the doubt you feel during growth is not your soul resisting change. It is your nervous system reacting to the loss of familiar dynamics. But there is a line between honest reflection and allowing someone else's discomfort to take up permanent residence inside your own thinking. The question worth asking is whether the doubt you are feeling is actually yours, or whether you have absorbed it from someone who cannot follow where you are going. Self-doubt mid-growth is sometimes just the shadow cast by someone else's fear. It is worth knowing the difference, because not everyone who pushes back is doing it from a place of harm. Some people genuinely love you and are simply frightened of losing the version of you that they knew how to reach. But even with that grace extended, there is still a moment that eventually arrives for every person who keeps growing past what their environment expected of them. Number 5. The moment you realize you cannot carry them and keep moving. There is a moment that comes quietly. It does not announce itself with a dramatic argument or a clear breaking point. It just settles in one day, like something you have known for a while but kept pushing to the back of the room. The moment you realize that moving forward and keeping everything the same are no longer options you can hold at the same time. There is no perfect speech for this. There is no conversation that ties it up neatly, no way to make someone understand your growth if they have decided that your growth is the problem. And looking for that conversation, waiting for the one exchange that will finally make them see it clearly, can keep you standing still for a very long time. Chosen ones eventually reach a painful threshold. The moment they realize they cannot stay loyal to their becoming and loyal to everyone else's comfort at the same time. At some point, growth asks a hard question. Do you want to be understood by everyone, or do you want to finally become who you were meant to be? Some people will grow alongside you. Not perfectly, not without friction, but they will stretch with you. The relationship will feel different for a while, awkward even, but it will hold, because the care underneath it is genuine and adaptable. Some people will not, and the distance that forms is not always a choice either person makes consciously. Sometimes it is simply what happens when two people are developing in different directions at different speeds. The space between you is not created by a fight. It is created by the quiet fact that you are no longer standing in the same place. That grief is real. Losing someone not through a confrontation but through growth, watching a relationship fade not because of cruelty but because you could no longer pretend to be who you were, is one of the lonelier experiences of becoming. But grief is the right response here, not guilt. There is an important distinction worth holding. There are people who cannot follow your growth, and there are people who are actively using your growth against you. One asks for patience and compassion. The other asks for honest evaluation. And for chosen ones, learning the difference is part of what protects the next version of their life. And once you move through that grief, something unexpected often begins to appear on the other side of it. Number 6. What grows in the space they left behind? Here is what most people do not talk about when they talk about outgrowing relationships. They talk about the loss, and the loss is real. But they rarely talk about what quietly begins to appear once you stop spending your energy managing someone else's discomfort with who you are becoming. When you stop shrinking yourself to keep the peace, something returns. Energy you did not even realize was gone. Attention that was always being redirected toward maintaining dynamics that no longer fit, you suddenly becomes available for things that actually matter to you. Clarity arrives, not all at once, but steadily, about what you want, about what feels right, about the kinds of people and conversations and spaces that actually restore you rather than drain you. And then, slowly, different people begin to appear. People who meet the current version of you without needing to compare it to a previous one. People for whom your confidence is not a challenge and your boundaries are not a threat. Connections that feel easy in a way that is hard to explain until you have experienced it, not because they require no effort, but because the effort does not cost you yourself. Growth changes what you can live around. It changes what feels normal, what feels heavy, what feels false, and what finally feels aligned. And because of that, you begin attracting people who do not need your confusion in order to feel comfortable beside you. For many chosen ones, this is where things begin to feel different in a deeper sense. Not because life suddenly becomes easy, but because what is aligned starts becoming easier to recognize. There is something worth naming here, though. This expansion does not happen immediately. There is usually a gap, a period of quiet that can feel uncomfortably like loneliness. The old connections have faded and the new ones have not yet arrived, and that in-between space is real and it is hard. That gap is not evidence that you made a mistake. It is simply the distance between who you were and who you are still becoming. What leaves your life during growth is not always punishment. Sometimes it is permission. Permission to stop living in rooms that only knew how to welcome the unfinished version of you. And what makes that journey possible brings us to the most important part of all of this. Finally, number 7, what you were protecting when you kept growing anyway. Through all of it, the friction, the distance, the quiet grief, the self-doubt, there is one thing worth naming clearly before this ends. Chosen ones, you were not growing to disturb anyone. You were not changing to leave people behind, or to prove something, or to become unrecognizable. You were growing because something inside you knew, without being able to fully articulate it, that the version of yourself that others had grown comfortable with was costing you something you could not keep giving. And that knowledge, The private, quiet knowing that the old version was never quite fully you took a kind of courage that rarely gets acknowledged. Not the loud kind, the slow kind. The kind that keeps moving even when the people around you go silent. Your growth was never the problem. You simply became harder to contain. And the people who needed you to stay small were revealing something true, not about your worth, but about the limits of what that particular relationship could hold. That is important. Their reaction was never a measure of your value, it was a measure of their capacity. And that kind of growth is not loud, it is not dramatic, it is sacred. It is the quiet decision to stop betraying yourself just to remain easy for other people to hold. So hear this clearly. You did not outgrow people because you stopped caring. You outgrew them because you finally started caring about yourself, about your soul, about your peace, about your calling, about the truth of who you are becoming. That is not something to explain away. It is not something to apologize for. It is something to carry with quiet dignity. So do not misread their discomfort as proof that you are going the wrong way. Sometimes the tension around a chosen one is not a warning, it is confirmation. Confirmation that something real has changed. Confirmation that you are no longer living at the same level of self-abandonment you once had to survive in. And carry this part too. The right people will not be disturbed by your growth. They will recognize it. And you are not alone in carrying it. There are many people in this space doing exactly this same work, growing while being misread, becoming while being doubted, moving forward while being asked to stay small. If this video put words to something you have been living, share it with another chosen one who needs this reminder today. Subscribe and stay close to this space. This is for the ones who are healing in silence, growing through misunderstanding, and refusing to shrink back into versions of themselves they have already outgrown. Until next time, protect your peace, honor your growth, and keep going.